Nikki found herself studying her husband with a gaze of disbelief and bewilderment. She was trying to comprehend when exactly he had transformed into the man standing before her. Or perhaps, she considered with a pang of regret, he had always been like this, and she had been blissfully ignorant, blind to his true colors. Regardless, she realized the timing of this revelation was irrelevant. The past couldn't be rewritten, and the present reality was what mattered now. "Stephen," Nikki began, her voice steady and assertive, "if we're investing in an apartment, it's only fair that we registered under both our names. I won't agree to any other arrangement. We've been saving together for this property, and now with the sale of my grandma's apartment, I'm contributing even more financially. Isn't it only equitable that my name too is on the deed? Would you agree that it wouldn't be right for us to pool our resources only for the apartment to be registered solely in your name?" Stephen's shoulders lifted in an impatient shrug. His face was a mask of visible annoyance, his patience worn thin by Nikki's reasoning. He took a moment biting back a sharp retort, trying to find a more amicable response, but his irritation, like a beast uncaged, got the better of him. "Why are you nitpicking, Nikki?" he blurted out, his voice tinged with frustration. "What does it matter whose name is on the papers? We're a family, aren't we? Squabbling over who invested what. It's just absurd. I mean, seriously, wow." He shook his head in disbelief, his hands gesturing in exasperation. "We are a family, and to me, these minor details are inconsequential. Can't you see that?" "Well, if it truly doesn't matter," Nikki retorted, her voice calm yet laced with a hint of defiance, "then let's just register the apartment in my name." "Wait, why in your name?" Stephen asked, his expression shifting to one of bewilderment as he turned to look at Nikki. "Well, you said it yourself. You don't care," Nikki responded, her words laced with a firm resolve. "So let's register the apartment in my name. That's how I prefer it." "Hold on. Isn't it the norm for the husband to be listed as the owner of the property? That's the traditional way of doing things, isn't it?" Stephen questioned, his voice revealing a hint of panic. This was a new side of Nikki he wasn't used to. She had always been agreeable, always compliant to his wishes, but now he was faced with an unexpected resistance that left him unsettled. Stephen was taken aback by her opposition. He had always taken for granted that Nikki would acquiesce to his suggestions, particularly on matters like this. Her newfound defiance was uncharted territory for him, leaving him unprepared and off balance. "Stephen, sweetheart, just stop," Nikki interjected gently, her voice firm. "We're living in a modern era where men and women share equal rights, and this isn't a new concept. So it's either both of our names in the paperwork, or we're not proceeding with the purchase at all." Stephen, desperate to salvage the situation, played his final card. "But the transaction fee for joint ownership is significantly higher. You're the one who's always emphasizing the need to cut back on our expenses," he protested. Nikki, unflappable, countered with a smirk. "Well, that's fine. I guess that means we'll need to cut back on your beer allowance then." Stephen was so surprised by her words that he nearly lost his footing. He couldn't believe that she had the audacity to challenge him like this. For a whole decade, she had been meek and agreeable, always nodding along with his decisions. Now, out of nowhere, she had found her voice and was asserting herself boldly. A thought flashed through Stephen's mind. It must be her friend Linda's influence. He had harbored a dislike for Linda ever since their first encounter. He suspected that Linda was the one filling Nikki's head with these rebellious ideas. Each time Linda visited, Stephen couldn't shake off the sensation that her piercing gaze was scrutinizing him, as though she were silently judging his every move. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, he always seemed to have a pressing engagement or an urgent errand to run whenever she popped in. Stephen felt cornered. His yearning for a spacious, luxurious apartment was undeniable, but the urge to be its sole proprietor was an even more potent force. He decided grudgingly to let the matter rest for now. Perhaps he thought he could revisit the issue at a later date, when the dust had settled and he could strategize anew. At that moment, Stephen's primary concern was to steer Nikki back to her usual, compliant self. He shuddered at the thought of her starting to question his evening absences or the apparent decrease in his salary. In reality, his salary hadn't shrunk. It was his spending that had inflated ever since he met Angela. And of course, Stephen had been making every effort to keep the secret expenditure concealed from Nikki. Nikki was the epitome of an ideal wife in Stephen's eyes. His clothes were always immaculately cleaned and ironed, a varied array of meals graced their table, and she was always available and accommodating to his needs. Yet, in his view, she was just too predictable and lacked the spark he craved. She was, in his eyes, a bit too mundane and monotonous. On the other hand, Nikki was quietly reveling in her newfound assertiveness. She had never imagined that she could stand up to her husband and voice her opinion so boldly. This unexpected resistance was a revelation, a turning point that filled her with an empowering sense of joy. She was keenly aware of every subtle change in Stephen's demeanor. His late-night returns, despite finishing work at 6 p.m., hadn't escaped her notice, nor had his increasing emotional distance or the fact that he seemed to view her as a fool, oblivious to his actions. She was far from ignorant. She saw everything, understood more than he knew, and she was quietly gathering strength. She had simply become accustomed to Stephen being her husband. They were perpetually together, a constant presence in each other's lives. He was always within reach, a familiar figure by her side. She had accepted this as a reality, as the natural order of things. But recently, Nikki found herself pondering deeper, unsettling thoughts. What if Stephen were to take things further? What if he decided to abandon her for another woman? The mere possibility caused her heart to constrict painfully. Naturally, she confided these fears to her friend Linda, seeking solace and advice from her trusted confidant. "Linda, if that ever happens, what should I do? How am I supposed to carry on with life?" Nikki asked, her voice filled with trepidation. Linda let out a snort of disbelief. "That's precisely the point, Nikki. Life is about truly living, not merely existing as you've been doing. It's always Stephen this, Stephen that. Honestly, I'm fed up with hearing it. Why are you constantly bending over backwards for him? When's the last time he even brought you flowers?" "But flowers are an extra expense. You know we're saving for a new apartment," Nikki defended. "So flowers are considered an expense, but Stephen dining out at fancy restaurants isn't?" Linda retorted, her voice laced with incredulity. "Nikki, sweetie, how can you not see this? Stephen only cares about himself, and he will never, I repeat, never make any sacrifices for you. Just look at yourself, working 2 jobs, tirelessly toiling like a workhorse, and earning not just double, but 4 times what he does. And despite all that, you still feel like you owe him something? Nikki, where did you lose sight of yourself?" Linda paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Remember who you were before all this. Remember the guys who used to chase after you, falling over themselves to win your attention. Do you recall Paul, for heaven's sake? Ever since you got married, it's like you've transformed into a completely different Nikki." "Linda, that's enough," Nikki interjected, her annoyance evident in her tone. "I didn't come here to be criticized. I just asked for your advice." "Oh, really?" Linda retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why do you even ask for advice if you never take it? But I'll give you one last piece of advice. Teach him to respect you. Make him understand that you have not only duties, but also rights in this relationship. Why are you letting yourself be treated like a doormat? If he tires of you, he'll simply discard you. Let me guess, is he insisting on registering the apartment in his name?" Nikki pondered for a moment before responding. "I mean, he's a man, the head of the family." At Nikki's words, Linda closed her eyes and clutched her head, letting out a long, exasperated sigh before shaking her head in disbelief. Nikki watched her mind a whirlpool of thoughts. Linda's words reverberated in her head, each one striking her heart like an arrow. A sudden realization dawned on her. What if Linda was right? What if all this time she'd been nothing more than a puppet, manipulated and used by Stephen? The thought was deeply unsettling. That night, sleep eluded Nikki. Her mind was a torrent of thoughts and reflections, replaying memories and past events. A nagging feeling told her that Linda was mostly correct in her observations, and when Stephen returned home later that evening, her suspicions were confirmed. She glanced at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Normally, she would have risen and prepared something for him to eat, but this time, she made a different choice. Instead of getting up, she simply turned over in bed, closing her eyes in an attempt to drift off to sleep. The apartment was truly magnificent. Large windows framed picturesque views, basking the space in warm, radiant sunlight. Stephen strolled around the apartment, a look of satisfaction spreading across his face. He paused by one of the windows, mumbling something under his breath as he gazed out at the view. "I'm the man," Stephen declared to the room. Nikki couldn't suppress a small grin at his display. Catching her smile, he turned to her. "What are you smiling about? Do you really think you could have bought such an apartment on your own? I doubt you'd even recognize a good investment if it stared you in the face." Nikki felt a pang of self-pity, but she chose to hold her tongue and not respond. They had finally bought the apartment, and she felt a sense of accomplishment. She was still under the impression that this was a shared victory, and that she could assert her interests a bit more in their shared life. More importantly, Stephen's dream had come true. Now, home would be an interesting place for him, a place where he would want to spend his time rather than elsewhere. And for a whole year, it seemed just like that. Nikki even broached the subject of starting a family. At this, Stephen looked at her, eyes wide in surprise. "Nikki, what baby are you talking about?" Stephen asked, caught off guard. "And don't start with that nonsense about us getting old. I've seen people having kids well into their 50s. Just look around. We have barely furnished this place. We need to buy things, fill up the apartment with furniture and stuff." Nikki could only sigh in response. She wanted to retaliate, to voice her own thoughts, but she found herself at a loss for words. There was truth in what Stephen was saying, and she struggled to find a counter-argument. 2 years later, the apartment's initial look was a distant memory. The place had undergone significant changes. Nikki had taken on every job she could find to earn a bit more money, her impatience driving her to buy everything they needed to make their home complete. Stephen began to vanish again, only this time he would return in the early hours of the morning. Nikki had a sinking feeling that something was about to happen, something that would completely upend her life. And whatever it was, it didn't take long to occur. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Stephen was unusually quiet. Nikki carried the conversation, talking about work, daily chores, and sharing anecdotes about her day. "Honey, I'm considering buying a new couch for us. I found some really good options. There is this new company that's offering a nice thermal mug as a bonus if you purchase their couch." However, Stephen simply chewed his food and kept his gaze fixed on his plate, offering no response. "Honey, did you notice the posters for the lost dog? They seem to have appeared a few days ago." "Speaking of dogs, why don't we consider getting one?" Nikki's eyes sparkled with excitement as she watched Stephen, who seemed mentally absent. He mumbled something in response, but it was too quiet for her to make out. While Nikki was accustomed to him occasionally ignoring her, his silence felt especially pronounced that day. It was uncharacteristically unlike him to stay this quiet. Stephen wiped his mouth with a napkin, signaling the end of his meal. He leaned back in his chair, let out a deep sigh, and said without looking at Nikki, "I'm tired." "Well, you should at least take a short walk after dinner to help with digestion. Don't just lie down right away. You need to—" "I'm tired of you, Nikki. Why don't you let me finish?" Stephen interrupted her. "I can't do this anymore. I just can't live like this any longer. I've been meaning to tell you this, but you kept distracting me with your relentless ideas." Nikki wasn't taken aback. She simply listened to him in silence. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she had a sinking feeling that she knew what was coming next. "I'm just not attracted to you anymore. I think it's over for us. And I need you to move out. I've been seeing someone else, and she'll be moving in soon." Perhaps it was because she had mentally prepared herself for this moment that not a single muscle twitched on Nikki's face as she absorbed Stephen's words. Her world, which had been teetering on the brink, now shattered completely. Yet she felt an eerie calm. She was like a boulder weathering any storm, feeling nothing. If this all turned out to be a joke, she might even find the humor in it. Nikki was just that kind of person. "Well, okay. I suppose you have every right," she responded evenly. "You're an adult, and if that's your decision, there is not much I can do about it, and I'm not going to try and stop you. Like I said, it's your right. However, I'm afraid I won't be moving out of the apartment, because it's mine too, and I plan on continuing to live here." Stephen's eyes widened in surprise at her boldness. He hadn't anticipated such a curveball. "Actually, I own half of the apartment," Stephen retorted. "Exactly. Half of it. You have every right to live here, but if you choose to move out, that's also your prerogative. Nikki countered. What are you talking about? I'm your husband after all. You're supposed to listen to me. I won't be moving into some rental. That's not gonna happen. Nikki stood up and declared firmly, Stephen, I don't want to keep arguing about this. I'm done with the discussion. I'll gather your things and put them on the couch. I trust you can pack them yourself. Nikki left the room, her determination unwavering, while Stephen stood there in disbelief, his jaw dropping. He contemplated how he would break news to his girlfriend, fully aware that she wouldn't be pleased with the turn of events. Realizing that he needed to take action, he stormed after Nikki. You can't just say that. Why can't you understand? Stephen shouted in frustration. You don't even have anyone, and you probably won't find another guy soon. But we need a place to live. Nikki nonchalantly shrugged her shoulders. So, where do I fit in your needs? Am I just an obstacle in your life? You can live wherever you wish. Stephen clenched his teeth and pounded his fist against the wall. He couldn't come to terms with the fact that Nikki was no longer obedient and submissive. You're going to regret this. I'll sell my half of the ownership and we'll see how you'll talk then. He seethed. Despite Nikki's belief that Stephen was merely attempting to intimidate her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease and doubt. The divorce proceedings unfolded in a conventional manner, with Stephen going to great lengths to meticulously divide even the kitchen utensils. He accompanied these actions with a barrage of complaints and insults, leaving Nikki feeling deeply hurt and disheartened. His new young girlfriend expressed her discontent as well, and Nikki had to endure hearing her complaints as she followed Stephen wherever he went. When the divorce proceedings finally came to an end, Nikki felt a sense of relief wash over her. However, to her dismay, this relief would prove to be short-lived. Just a couple of months later, Stephen unexpectedly showed up at her doorstep. What's up, Nikki? Still happy that you kicked me out, huh? Stephen began, his tone filled with bitterness. Nikki frowned and raised an eyebrow, finding his accusation absurd. Kicked you out? She couldn't help but chuckle at the notion. What do you want, Stephen? I'm just here to ask if you've reconsidered leaving the apartment for us, Stephen said with a hint of desperation. Stephen, are you out of your mind? Why would I give up the apartment to you? Nikki retorted, her voice tinged with disbelief. Fine, suit yourself, Stephen replied dismissively, because I've actually found a buyer for half of it. They're coming tomorrow to check it out. Enjoy being alone. I hope you regret your decision. Nikki felt a mixture of frustration and determination rise within her as she faced this new challenge. After Stephen stormed out, Nikki sank into a chair, feeling a wave of sadness wash over her. For the first time since the ordeal began, she questioned herself. What did I wrong to deserve such treatment? She asked, her voice filled with anguish. We spent so many years together. Why is he intent on making my life more and more miserable? What have I done to deserve this? Throughout the divorce process, Nikki had tried to avoid causing unnecessary trouble. She had even agreed to many of the terms, hoping for a peaceful resolution. 3 days later, upon returning to the apartment, a sinking feeling enveloped Nikki. She had a hunch that Stephen had kept his words. As she entered, the scent of frying meat filled the air. Someone was in the kitchen, cooking. Nikki cautiously took a few steps forward, unable to see the person's face. Standing at the stove was a tall, physically fit man. He appeared lost in thought, holding a pinch of salt in his hand. The table is set for 2, Nikki remarked, realizing that the man was expecting guests. But why was he using her dishes and setting her table? Hi, Nikki said confidently, ready to confront the unwelcome guest. Startled, the man jumped up, causing the salt cellar to slip from his hands. He quickly picked it up and turned to face her. Good evening, the man began hesitantly. I'm sorry for using the kitchen without your permission. I just wanted to make getting to know you a little more pleasant. Nikki looked around, feeling confused. Are you cooking for me? The man finally smiled. Well, yes. Stephen warned me that you weren't exactly friendly with strangers, but please take a seat. Nikki stood frozen, gazing at the man for a long moment without uttering a word. The man grew nervous, glancing at himself to ensure he didn't appear abnormal. Is something wrong? I mean, please don't freak out, he continued, attempting to reassure her. Stephen informed me that you own half of the apartment. I'm not going to ask how you two bought it in the first place. That's none of my business. I was just looking for an affordable place to stay and saw the advertisement. Don't worry, I'm a contractor. We're building a house in the nearby woods, so I'll be out there most of the time and hopefully won't bother you much. Please have a seat. Nikki didn't pay much attention to his explanation. She continued to observe the man, trying to figure out where she had seen him before. "Did you happen to go to Red Springs High?" Nikki asked the man. The man looked at her, his expression filled with surprise. "I did. Why do you ask?" "Paul?" Nikki asked, a slight smile forming on her face. "No way," Paul replied, his eyes widening in disbelief. "You've changed a lot," Paul remarked, not expecting to encounter someone who had once been so special to him. An awkward silence filled the room before Paul broke it. "Please have a seat." Nikki complied, taking her place at the table, while Paul busily arranged the dishes he had prepared. When Stephen had informed him about the lonely, unfriendly woman living in the apartment, he never anticipated it would be Nikki. He found amusement in the twist of fate that had brought them together once again. "So, who's Stephen? Is he your friend?" Paul asked, unaware of the irony in his question, as he had misunderstood Stephen's remark about Nikki's unfriendliness. Something stirred within Nikki at the mention of Stephen's name, and tears that she had kept hidden for so long welled up, threatening to spill over. Hey, what's happening? Are you alright?" Paul asked with concern, guiding Nikki to the sofa. She sat down, and in that moment, she found herself pouring out her story about her relationship with Stephen. During her high school years, Nikki received a lot of attention from guys. But growing up in a conservative family, Nikki had always been taught that relationships should be approached with care and seriousness. Her parents, who held traditional values, believed that fostering strong and meaningful connections required a level of thoughtfulness and commitment. They saw it as a way to protect their daughter from potential heartbreak and ensure that she would find a partner who valued and respected her. Nikki respected her parents' advice and understood that their guidance was rooted in their love for her. Their teachings helped shape her perspective on relationships, making her more discerning when it came to matters of the heart. She valued the importance of finding a genuine connection, one that was built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. While her friends often indulged in casual dating and fleeting romances, Nikki approached her own relationships with caution. She knew that her parents' intentions were to provide her with a strong foundation for long-term happiness. Their emphasis on the significance of genuine and meaningful connections allowed Nikki to navigate her teenage years with a sense of purpose and integrity. As she grew older, Nikki carried these lessons with her, appreciating the value of taking relationships seriously. It instilled in her a sense of patience and a desire to find someone who shared her beliefs and aspirations. Nikki believed that her parents' advice had prepared her well for the challenges and joys that lay ahead in the realm of love and companionship. During her junior year, Nikki found herself in the same class as Paul, who was a senior. Little did she know, Paul had been smitten with her from the very moment they had their first class together. However, being a shy and reserved guy, Paul hesitated to approach Nikki right away. Nikki, completely unaware of Paul's hidden feelings, never suspected that he harbored any romantic interest in her. If only she had known, perhaps things would have turned out differently. Nikki's genuine simplicity and natural beauty attracted attention from her peers, particularly the girls who in their own insecurities felt threatened by her presence. When word got out that Paul had feelings for Nikki, some of her friends cautioned her against pursuing a relationship with him. They claimed that he wasn't the right guy for her and warned that he would only end up breaking her heart. Paul, much like Nikki, was a person of simplicity and humility. When Nikki rejected his advances, he respected her decision and didn't push any further. He believed that if she wasn't interested, it was best to let her go and find happiness elsewhere. Both Nikki and Paul carried the weight of unspoken feelings and missed opportunities, each unaware of the other's true emotions. The untold connection between them remained hidden as they navigated their academic lives separately, never realizing the potential that had gone unexplored. Nikki and Stephen's story had a unique beginning. They first connected online through a mutual friend's post. It all started when their friend shared a question about dealing with depression while grieving the loss of her elderly parents. The comments section was filled with words of encouragement, urging her to stay strong. Instead of leaving a public comment, Nikki decided to reach out to her friend privately, offering support and lending a listening ear. They engaged in a heartfelt conversation, which helped uplift her friend's spirits during a difficult time. Impressed by Nikki's genuine compassion and kindness, her friend later made another post acknowledging the power of sincere intentions. Within the post, a mutual picture of Nikki and her friend was shared. This caught the attention of several people, including one particular guy who reached out to Nikki through a direct message. That guy was Stephen. Nikki and Steven started chatting, getting to know each other on a deeper level. Their conversations revolved around various aspects of life as they shared their experiences, thoughts, and feelings. Steven was drawn to Nikki's compassionate nature and her willingness to lend a listening ear. He found solace and comfort in their exchanges, appreciating her genuine intention to understand and support him. As their connection deepened, so did their attraction. Steven found himself increasingly drawn to Nikki's warmth and kindness, and he began to develop strong feelings for her. Their online conversations became an important part of their lives, allowing them to form a bond built on understanding and emotional connection. Steven frequently vented about his frustrations with his boss at work to Nikki. During one of their conversations, he opened up about his now ex-girlfriend, expressing his dissatisfaction with her lack of support and understanding for his worries. He confided in Nikki, sharing that he had recently ended the relationship and was feeling down. He yearned for someone who could reassure him and offer comfort during this difficult time. Nikki, with her natural empathy and compassionate nature, became the perfect confidant for Steven. She listened attentively, offering words of encouragement and assuring him that everything would be all right. Their connection grew stronger, and it wasn't long before their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Their shared experiences and emotional connection served as the foundation of their relationship. Steven found solace and understanding in Nikki's presence, appreciating her ability to provide the support he had always longed for. As their love for each other deepened, Steven realized that Nikki was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. In a heartfelt moment, Steven took the leap and asked for Nikki's hand and heart, expressing his desire for a future together. Their journey, which started with shared conversations and emotional support, had now brought them to a pivotal moment of commitment and love. After Paul finished listening to Nikki's heartfelt story about her journey with Steven, he rose from his seat, a hint of anger visible on his face. The weight of Nikki's experience resonated with him, and he couldn't help but feel a mix of empathy and frustration on her behalf. "I'm truly sorry about the predicament you've been through," Paul began, his voice filled with genuine sympathy. "But hey, at least now you're free from that toxic relationship, and that's definitely a positive outcome." Nikki felt a surge of relief and gratitude as Paul acknowledged her newfound freedom. It was a bittersweet moment as she realized how blind she had been to Steven's manipulative ways for all those years. She reflected on missed red flags and moments of doubt that she had brushed aside in the past. As Paul skillfully removed the plastic cover from the salad container, Nikki watched his movements, finding solace in the simplicity of the task. The act of uncovering the salad became symbolic for Nikki, an unveiling of truth and clarity in her life. A mix of emotions flooded her mind as she gazed at Paul. Here they were, sharing an unexpected moment together, connected by shared experiences and newfound understanding. His self-deprecating humor broke the tension, bringing a much-needed lightness to the atmosphere. With the plates and salad meticulously arranged, Paul reached into his bag and produced a bottle of wine. Nikki's eyes lit up with surprise and appreciation as he effortlessly opened it, a gesture to create an ambience of relaxation and enjoyment. "Please make yourself comfortable," Paul invited with a warm smile, motioning for Nikki to join him at the table. "Let's forget about everything for a moment, Nikki. Tonight, let's savor this meal, unwind, and find solace in each other's company. No worries, no stress, just a quiet moment of shared peace and enjoyment." They sat at the table, eating and engaging in lively conversation. Nikki's mood gradually improved as the evening unfolded, and she found herself talking non-stop, pouring out her thoughts and experiences. Paul, too, shared stories and listened attentively, creating a safe space for open dialogue and connection. Their shared laughter and meaningful exchanges carried them through the night, extending their conversation until the early hours of the morning. As they finished their meal, Nikki's mind became filled with thoughts and reflections. Lost in her contemplation, she lowered her gaze, unaware that Paul was attuned to her emotions. Sensing her introspection, he broke the silence, his words carrying a touch of sincerity. "What a day it has been," Paul remarked, a smile playing on his lips. "I truly had a wonderful evening with you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I can imagine you must be tired and in need of rest." Nikki nodded, acknowledging her fatigue. "Yes, I should get some sleep. Thank you for the delightful dinner and the pleasant conversation." As Nikki started to rise from her seat, preparing to clear the table, Paul reached out, gently placing his hand on hers, causing her to pause. His touch sent a subtle jolt of warmth through her, and she looked at him curiously. "I'll take care of this," Paul offered, a reassuring smile gracing his face. Go ahead and get some sleep. You deserve it." Grateful for his understanding and thoughtfulness, Nikki smiled and expressed her appreciation. She headed towards her bedroom, her mind swirling with a mix of emotions and newfound possibilities. But just as she was about to exit the kitchen, a sudden urge compelled her to turn back and see clarity. With newfound courage, she spoke up, her voice filled with determination. "Paul, are you—" Before she could finish her sentence, Paul anticipated her question and gently interrupted. "No, Nikki, I did try, but it didn't work out." Nikki had taken the day off from work, intending to have a relaxing morning and indulge in some well-deserved rest. However, a curious feeling tugged at her, prompting her to check if Paul was still in the apartment. Curiosity got the better of her, and she quietly made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise and delight, there was Paul, standing at the stove, skillfully preparing omelets as if he had never left since the night before. The enticing aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, captivating Nikki's senses. She stood at the doorway, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she observed them. In that moment, an unexpected desire welled up within her, a longing to stay at home, to cast aside all obligations and commitments, and simply revel in the presence of this wonderful person in the kitchen. It was a newfound feeling, one that made her question the rush of the outside world and embrace the simple joys of being in the company of someone who understood her. As she watched Paul, completely unaware of her presence, Nikki felt a sense of comfort and tranquility settle over her. It was as if time stood still, encapsulating a rare moment of connection and contentment. In that kitchen, with the tantalizing scent of coffee and the sight of Paul's focused yet serene demeanor, Nikki realized that sometimes the greatest moments could be found in the simplicity of shared space and genuine companionship. In the months that followed, Nikki and Paul embarked on a series of delightful adventures together. Laughter became a constant presence in their lives, something Nikki hadn't experienced in such abundance throughout her marriage. Paul's infectious sense of humor brought joy and lightheartedness into their days, lifting Nikki's spirits and reminding her of the beauty of genuine laughter. What began as a roommate arrangement blossomed into a remarkable connection between two souls. Nikki and Paul discovered the perfect harmony in their companionship, finding solace and support in each other's presence. They effortlessly complemented one another, their strengths and weaknesses blending seamlessly. Paul, determined to bring joy into Nikki's life, delighted her with a multitude of surprises. From spontaneous day trips to hidden picnic spots to surprise movie nights under the stars, Paul consistently went above and beyond to create memorable experiences for both of them. As the bond between them deepened, their relationship naturally evolved into a romantic one. Nikki couldn't deny the growing affection she felt for Paul, a love that bloomed from a foundation of trust, shared experiences, and a genuine connection. They embarked on this new chapter with excitement, cherishing the journey they were embarking upon together. Nikki finally felt a sense of liberation, realizing that true happiness could exist beyond the confines of her previous marriage. With Paul by her side, she discovered the joys of being herself, embraced by love, laughter, and an unwavering support that filled her heart with warmth and contentment. Angela nudged Stephen on the side. "Look at that jacket. Honey, I want one too." Stephen frowned. Angela's demands were so high that the money they made from selling half of the apartment evaporated like smoke, and Stephen couldn't afford to tell that to Angela. She would start complaining right away, saying, "Aren't you a man? Aren't you the breadwinner? Do something." Stephen tried to lure her away, but Angela stood there firmly. He had seen the price tag for such a jacket. "Please, please, please, honey. I want the same jacket. It's trendy right now." At that moment, the woman wearing the jacket said something to the man standing next to her. He leaned in and took her by the hand. They both turned around and faced Stephen and Angela. Stephen froze in his tracks, and Angela grew quiet. It was clear that the woman wearing the trendy jacket, who was also clearly pregnant, was none other than Nikki. She recognized her ex-husband, and Stephen recognized the buyer of half of his apartment as well. Paul immediately stiffened, as if ready to protect his wife if anything happened. Stephen's face contorted, and a wry smirk appeared on his face. "Well, well, well, look who's here. You turned out to be way more cunning than you seemed. Trick the buyer so you don't lose the apartment, huh? What a witch you are." Stephen had more to say, but he couldn't continue because of a heavy blow that knocked him down. Paul squatted over him and said, "You listen to me, prick. Never, ever look or say anything to my wife again. If you try, I'm going to break your neck, I promise. Now, do you understand? Stephen began nodding profusely. Paul got up and straightened himself. He looked at Stephen's wife, who was standing there not knowing what to do, and said, I've got nothing against you. I apologize for hitting your husband in front of you. Paul took Nikki's hand, and they headed towards the exit. Stephen got up, turned to Angela, and said, Did you see that? You're the witness. I'm going to sue them. Angela looked at him with irritation and replied, Keep me out of your dirty business, you loser. She headed towards the exit. Honey, come on, don't go. I need a hand, please. But Angela just waved her hand and disappeared.
My name is Aliyah, a 49-year-old single mother. Life had been challenging since I divorced my husband, Jeremiah, during my pregnancy, but I was determined to provide for my son, Samuel. Thankfully, I took over the family business and worked hard to make sure Samuel never lacked anything. Samuel grew up to be a diligent and caring young man, a little shy, but always a high achiever. He had a dream of becoming a doctor, and I supported him with every ounce of my being. After Samuel got accepted into a prestigious medical school, I decided to let him live near the university, which was about 2 hours away by train. There was a student dormitory nearby that seemed like the perfect fit, even though parents weren't allowed inside, a rule meant to encourage independence. Though I was a bit sad that I couldn't see his room, I knew this was all part of him growing up. For the first few weeks after he moved in, Samuel would message me often, telling me about his classes and new life. But as time passed, his messages started to become less frequent. I tried to remind myself that he was probably just busy. No news is good news, right? A week before Christmas, Samuel called. Hearing his lively voice made me smile. He told me he had made a friend at the dorm, a boy named Eli, who had nowhere to go for Christmas. Samuel, being the kind-hearted young man he was, asked if he could bring Eli home for the holidays. I was surprised. Samuel wasn't usually the type to make friends easily, but I was happy he had found someone he felt close to. I welcomed the idea without hesitation. When Samuel and Eli arrived, I was taken aback. I had expected someone quiet like my son, but Eli was the complete opposite. He had brightly dyed hair, piercings in both ears, and an attitude that rubbed me the wrong way from the moment he stepped inside. He greeted me casually, almost arrogantly, and made himself comfortable without a second thought. During his 3-day stay, I noticed how Eli often gave Samuel orders, demanding to go to the arcade, or having Samuel fetch things for him. I didn't like it, but Samuel didn't seem to mind, so I held my tongue. I just wanted my son to be happy. After Christmas, Samuel returned to the dorm, and once again, our contact became sparse. I would still receive a thank you note every month for the money I sent, but the cheerful voice that used to call me was becoming more and more distant. I told myself he was simply focused on his studies. After all, medical school was no easy feat. Then, in the spring, I received a call from Samuel. He sounded different, tired and worried. He explained that he had been too busy to keep up with his part-time job and couldn't pay his rent. He asked if I could send him some extra money. I was surprised. Samuel had always been responsible with his finances. But I agreed, reminding him to be more careful in the future. His voice was quiet as he thanked me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The following month, I called Samuel to confirm that I had transferred the living expenses to his account, just like I did at the end of every month. Samuel's response shocked me. "Thanks for the $15, Mom. I've been eating baked potatoes every day," he said casually. I froze. "What do you mean, $15? I send you $1,500 every month," I replied, my heart pounding. We both fell silent, each confused by the other's words. According to my bank records, I had been transferring $1,500 as usual. So why did Samuel think he was only receiving $15? Samuel hesitated before speaking again. "Mom, isn't your company struggling? Eli told me you were having financial trouble, so I thought you had to cut back," he explained. My confusion quickly turned into anger. My company was doing better than ever. Where had Samuel gotten the idea that we were struggling? I clenched my jaw. "Samuel, I'll sort this out. Don't worry, I promised, hanging up the phone. I had to get to the bottom of this, and I had a feeling I knew exactly who was behind it. I took a taxi to Samuel's dormitory, my mind racing the entire way. When I arrived, I called Samuel and asked him to come out, making sure no one else saw him leave. He sounded confused, but agreed. As he approached the car, my heart sank. Samuel, who had always been so strong and healthy, looked frail, his face pale, his body reduced to skin and bones. I could barely recognize him. "Mom," he said, his voice weak. "It's been a while." Tears welled up in my eyes. "What happened to you, Samuel?" I asked, my voice trembling. At first, Samuel tried to brush it off, saying he was fine, but eventually he opened up. He explained that after Christmas, Eli had told him that I was struggling financially. Shortly after, Samuel received a new bank book, and since then, the support money had been only $15 a month. He had believed Eli, thinking I was in trouble and doing my best to support him with what little I could. My heart ached as I listened. None of this made sense. I had never sent Samuel a new bank book, and I had certainly never reduced the support money. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "Samuel, let's go to the police," I said, my voice firm. Samuel looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The money I've been sending you might have been stolen," I explained. Samuel seemed to understand, though the realization pained him. He nodded slowly, and we headed to the nearest police station. At the station, a young officer listened to our story and offered us words of comfort. "You've both been through a lot," he said gently. Hearing this, Samuel finally broke down in tears. The officer then mentioned that there had been similar complaints from other families with children in the dormitory. My heart sank even further. "The suspect wouldn't happen to be Eli Rodriguez, would it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The officer sighed and nodded. Samuel, standing beside me, looked down, his shoulders shaking. I placed my hand on his back, trying to offer some comfort. The officer led us to a private room and asked us to file a report. As we filled out the paperwork, he explained that Eli had been acting as a contact person, befriending students and gaining access to their bank account details. Once he had the information, someone else would withdraw the money. When the officer showed me a photo of the suspected accomplice, my heart stopped. I recognized the man immediately. "That's Jeremiah Rodriguez," I said, my voice trembling. "He's my ex-husband, Samuel's father." Samuel's eyes widened in shock. "Dad?" he whispered. The officer nodded solemnly. "We've also established that Eli is Jeremiah's son," he added. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Jeremiah had an affair while I was pregnant, and Eli was the result of that affair. I felt sick. Samuel and Eli were half-brothers. I looked at Samuel, who seemed completely overwhelmed. "I'm so sorry, Samuel," I whispered. He just stood there, frozen, unable to process what he had just learned. The officer explained that they needed our cooperation to catch Eli and Jeremiah. We agreed to help, and I returned Samuel to the dormitory, pretending that everything was normal. I stayed at a nearby hotel, waiting for the right moment to act. The next day, I called Samuel, knowing that Eli was likely nearby. Samuel put the phone on speaker, and I told him that I had some extra money and would be depositing it into his account. Samuel played along, thanking me. I then transferred $10,000 into Samuel's account, knowing that Eli would be tempted. The following morning, Samuel checked his account and sent the evidence to the police. It wasn't long before the police and I arrived at the dormitory. The manager led us to Eli's room, and when Eli opened the door, he froze at the sight of us. "Long time no see, Eli," I said, forcing a smile. Eli tried to close the door, but the officers pushed it open, beginning their search. It didn't take long for them to find what they were looking for: multiple bank books and cards, each with different names. My heart ached as I realized the extent of Eli's deception. "How could you do this, Eli?" I asked, my voice breaking. Eli looked at Samuel, his eyes filled with anger. "I thought you were my friend," he spat. Samuel remained silent, his face expressionless. I stepped forward. "Swindling money from your half-brother. How low can you get?" I said. Eli's eyes widened. "Half-brother?" he repeated, his voice shaky. "Jeremiah Rodriguez is my ex-husband," I explained. "He's Samuel's father. You two are brothers." Eli sank to the floor, stunned. The police escorted Eli away, and Samuel and I went to the station to provide additional information. According to the investigation, Eli had been targeting students, getting them drunk or visiting their rooms under the guise of friendship. He would then steal their bank books and IDs, using the information to set up new accounts. The money I had been sending Samuel had been transferred to a different account, with only $15 being deposited into the new one, just enough to keep Samuel from asking questions. Eli quickly named Jeremiah as his accomplice, and by the next evening, Jeremiah was arrested as well. I hadn't seen Jeremiah in 20 years, but I decided to visit him. I needed closure. Samuel wanted to come, but I asked him to wait outside. When I saw Jeremiah, I barely recognized him. He had aged, but his condescending attitude remained. Well, if it isn't Aaliyah," he sneered. "What do you want?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Your parents wanted me to give you this," I said, placing a piece of paper in front of him. His face paled as he read it. "A disownment letter," I explained. "Your parents are done with you, Jeremiah. They want nothing to do with you after everything you've done." Jeremiah's eyes filled with panic. "You can't do this," he said, his voice cracking. I shook my head. "You did this to yourself," I replied, turning away from him. As I left the visitation room, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Jeremiah's protests faded behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Jeremiah was sentenced to several years in prison for his crimes, while Eli received probation. He was placed under the care of Jeremiah's parents, who were determined to help him turn his life around. It wouldn't be easy, but I hoped that Eli could find a way to move forward. Samuel, though shaken by everything that had happened, decided to focus on his studies. He was determined to become a doctor, and I knew he would succeed. As for me, I continued to run my business, which was thriving more than ever. I even received a marriage proposal from someone who had been by my side for years, supporting me through all the ups and downs. Samuel encouraged me to accept, saying that I deserved to be happy. For now, though, my focus was on supporting Samuel and helping him achieve his dreams. Once he was settled, I would think about my own future. Despite everything, I knew that Samuel and I would be okay. We had faced challenges that could have torn us apart, but instead, they had brought us closer together. And as we looked ahead to the future, I knew that we had the strength to face whatever came our way, together.
At a small gas station, a young attendant helped an elderly man by paying for his fuel, unaware that this small act of kindness would lead to her unexpected dismissal. The very next day, the elderly man returned with a surprising twist, one that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Hello and welcome to Unveiled Narratives. I'm excited to share another story with you, one that I hope inspires, entertains, and keeps you coming back for more. On a busy afternoon at the gas station, Charlotte moved quickly between cars, filling each tank for the waiting customers. As she finished with one, her gaze shifted to the next in line. Inside a worn sedan, she noticed an elderly man glancing around nervously as if he wanted to ask something. Sensing his discomfort, Charlotte stepped closer, offering a warm, reassuring smile. "Is there a problem, sir? Do you need any help?" she asked gently, her voice calm and inviting. The elderly man hesitated, then said in a quiet, almost ashamed voice, I forgot my wallet at home. I don't have enough cash to fill my tank." His words were hesitant, as though admitting it was hard for him. Charlotte's heart went out to him. She could feel the discomfort and embarrassment in his words, but before she could say anything, one of her co-workers, standing a few feet away, heard the conversation and shook his head. "Lost your wallet, huh?" he called out with a loud, mocking tone. "Maybe Santa can bring you some gas." A few customers laughed, their voices low but not enough to hide the humor in their words. The elderly man's face turned red with embarrassment, and he looked away, his hands wringing in his lap. Charlotte could see the hurt in his eyes, and quickly shot her co-worker a sharp look, her expression stern. Without hesitation, she reached into her purse and pulled out the exact amount for his fuel and handed it to the elderly man. With a gentle smile, she said, "It's all right, I've got this. You can pay me back whenever you can." The elderly man looked up, his eyes filling with gratitude. His voice was unsteady as he said, "Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise I'll come back to repay you." His expression held a depth of gratitude that words couldn't fully express. A few customers who had quietly laughed earlier now exchanged soft, approving smiles with Charlotte. Meanwhile, her co-workers, who had made fun of the elderly man, stood awkwardly, their earlier smirks replaced by discomfort. With a final, grateful nod, the elderly man started his car, glancing back with a warm smile. As he drove away, Charlotte felt a quiet glow of warmth settle in her heart. As the elderly man drove off, one of Charlotte's co-workers scoffed, shaking his head. "You're too soft, Charlotte," he said with a mocking tone. "Handing out gas like that? Do you really think he's coming back to pay you?" From a few feet away, another co-worker chimed in with a smirk. "Sure, go ahead and be everyone's hero," she added, her voice laced with sarcasm. "But you're new. You'll learn how things really work soon enough." Charlotte felt their words nibbling at her confidence, but she remained calm, her resolve unshaken. She simply nodded with a polite smile, choosing not to argue. She knew she had done the right thing, and their words wouldn't change that. Ignoring their dismissive glances, she focused back on her work, quietly reassured in her choice. The next day, around the same time as before, Charlotte was busy at the gas station when she spotted the elderly man's familiar sedan pulling up to the pump. Her heart lifted as she recognized him. Nearby, her co-workers who had mocked her the day before exchanged uncertain glances. They straightened up, hints of surprise and discomfort crossing their faces as they watched the elder man step out of his car. With gratitude shining in his eyes, he walked over to Charlotte, holding out a small amount of cash and an envelope. His appreciation was unmistakable as he said, "Miss, I told you I'd come back. Here's what you paid yesterday and a little something extra to say thank you." Charlotte accepted the cash with a warm smile and, hesitantly, opened the envelope he handed her. Inside, she found several crisp $100 bills, far more than she'd expected, and nearly enough to cover a month's salary. She looked up, moved by his gesture, but gently shook her head. "Thank you so much, but this is more than I can accept," she said, handing the envelope back to him. "I just wanted to help." The elderly man's expression softened, recognizing the sincerity in her refusal. With a warm smile, he introduced himself. "My name's Paul," he said, meeting her eyes with gratitude. "You didn't have to trust me like this, but you did, and I won't forget this kindness." Charlotte smiled back, feeling a deep sense of connection. "I'm Charlotte. I'm just glad I could help you, Mr. Paul." As she handed back the envelope, her co-workers, who had doubted her judgment, now stood silent, their previous smirks replaced with downcast expressions. Some looked away, unable to meet her gaze, embarrassed by their reactions the day before. The elder man gave Charlotte one last thankful nod before he returned to his car and drove away, leaving behind a scene of quiet admiration among those who had witnessed the exchange. Charlotte felt a quiet pride as she turned back to her work, knowing her choice had spoken for itself. When Charlotte's shift ended that evening, she gathered her things, expecting to head home, but her manager called her into his office. As she walked in, she noticed the seriousness in his expression. He motioned for her to sit down. The manager explained that paying for someone else's fuel, no matter how well-intentioned, was a violation of company rules. It opened the door for potential problems. Customers could begin to expect favors, others might start taking advantage, and worst of all, it could lead to favoritism, which can affect company reputation. "I saw the exchange this afternoon with the elderly man," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your kindness, Charlotte. You did a good thing, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The company policy is clear. We're not allowed to engage in personal transactions with customers." Charlotte's heart sank as she listened, a sense of dread settling in. She had never thought her small act of kindness could cause trouble. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to let you go," the manager said, his voice soft but resolute. Charlotte whirled, seemed to stop for a moment. "I understand," she whispered, trying to hold back the tears that were welling up in her eyes. She stood up slowly, unable to find the words to respond. As she passed through the door, the tears she had fought so hard to keep in finally fell. She wiped her eyes quickly, but the weight of the situation was too much. She had done what she thought was right, but now she was left with nothing but the quiet sadness of knowing that doing good had cost her everything. After losing her job, Charlotte found herself overwhelmed with worry. She had left her home state and the comfort of her family to come here, moving for a chance to earn a degree, a future she could be proud of. Working at the gas station had helped cover her rent and some basic expenses. She immediately started searching for work again. Each morning she pored over job listings, sent out resumes, and followed up on applications. Her thoughts were consumed by the growing worry of how she would cover her college tuition and other expenses. One afternoon, Charlotte heard through a mutual friend about a part-time job opening at a nearby convenience store. Grateful for even the smallest opportunity, she applied right away and soon secured the position as a cashier. But the pay was minimal, just enough to cover her rent and groceries. She was still far from having the funds she needed for tuition, and with each passing day, the possibility of having to leave college weighed more heavily on her. One morning, as Charlotte sat in her small apartment, her mind wandered to how she would manage her upcoming tuition fees. Just then, her phone buzzed with a new email notification. She glanced down, expecting another bill reminder, but instead, the subject line read, "Education Sponsorship." Confused, she opened the email, half wondering if it was some sort of mistake. But as she read through it, her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a standard scholarship. It was a personalized education grant, covering her tuition fees for the semester and even providing a modest living stipend to ease her financial stress. She read the message again and again, her disbelief turning to relief. Then she noticed a line at the end, "Sponsored by a private donor who wishes to remain anonymous." She sat there, speechless, grateful yet mystified by this unexpected kindness. As she contemplated the unexpected blessing, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Mr. Paul, the elderly man standing there, his familiar smile a comforting sight. He greeted her warmly, though there was a hint of something heavier in his eyes. "Charlotte," he said softly, "I've been thinking about you. I heard what happened at the gas station. I wanted to come by and make sure you're all right." She nodded, a small smile forming on her face. "I'm okay," she replied. "I did what I thought was right. I have no regrets." Mr. Paul's eyes filled with concern. "I feel responsible for what happened. I went back to the station a couple of days after our last meeting, but you weren't there. I asked around and found out you were let go because of what you did for me." He paused, his expression pained. Charlotte's heart sank, but she quickly shook her head. "It wasn't your fault. I helped because I wanted to." But the elder man didn't seem convinced. "Still, I can't help but feel guilty. So I decided to do something for you." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, handing it to her. "This is for you." Charlotte took it, still unsure of what to expect. As she opened it, she saw the letter confirming a scholarship, one large enough to cover her entire college education. This is too much," she whispered, overwhelmed. Mr. Paul gave her a soft smile. "I'm just returning the favor. You shouldn't have to worry about your education." She could hardly believe it, but the gratitude in her chest was overwhelming. Still, she hesitated, unable to fully accept. "I don't know how to thank you." Mr. Paul placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to thank me. I'm only helping because you deserve it." Before she could speak, Mr. Paul reached into his coat once more. This time he pulled out another letter, this one sealed with the emblem of his business. "I've been working on a new business venture, Charlotte," he said, looking at her with a softness in his eyes, as if he truly understood the weight of her struggles. "I've run many businesses over the years," he began gently, "but this one is different. It's a new venture, and I need someone I can trust to help make it a success, someone with a kind heart like you. I'm offering you a position as my business assistant. You'd be helping with operations and managing important tasks." Charlotte's mind whirled. "A job?" He nodded. "Yes. I believe in you, Charlotte. This isn't just about giving you money, but about offering you a chance to build something for yourself." Her mind was still catching up to the whirlwind of surprises, but despite the shock, there was a quiet warmth in her heart. The man who had been a stranger just weeks ago had now given her both a future and a way to stand on her own. She looked at the two letters in her hands, a scholarship and job offer, and felt overwhelming emotion rise in her chest. As Charlotte settled into her new role, she was surprised by how much there was to learn, and by how patient Mr. Paul was with her. He took time each day to walk her through tasks, guiding her with a warmth that went beyond any typical mentor. It felt like he wanted her to succeed, not just for the business, but for herself. Sometimes, as they worked side by side, he'd share stories from his years in the industry. His words were filled with hard-earned wisdom, and she felt deeply grateful to learn from someone with so much experience. Every story, every lesson, felt like he was passing on a part of himself. Over time, Charlotte's dedication and growth didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Paul, who had watched her learn and thrive with quiet pride, began to trust her with more responsibilities. Little by little, he handed over the reins, confident in her abilities and assured by her integrity. One day, in his unassuming way, he shared his plan to fully step back, leaving her to lead the company. Charlotte was overwhelmed, her heart swelling with gratitude and purpose. She knew that this trust was a gift, a responsibility she would honor. What began as a brief connection had transformed into something much deeper, something that felt like family. Charlotte felt a quiet gratitude that ran deeper than words, a thankfulness not only for the opportunity he'd given her, but for the kindness and trust he'd shown her. In helping him that day, she had unknowingly created a new beginning for herself, a chance to build a life shaped by kindness. And as she continued forward, she knew she would carry that lesson with her, a reminder of how compassion always finds its way back, often in the most beautiful and unexpected forms. I hope this story brought a moment of warmth and enjoyment to your day. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps keep us motivated to bring you more stories like this. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Kyle was seated in his modest office, his eyes fixated on the wall in front of him. Today marked the 7th sorrowful anniversary of his fiance's inexplicable departure. This was not just a simple case of her walking out on him, but an incident that had left him swimming in an ocean of uncertainty and unanswered questions. All he had to piece together the puzzle was a letter, a cryptic memento left behind by his lost love. The neatly folded piece of paper had been read and reread so many times that he had lost count. However, the mystery veiled with its words continued to elude him. The content of the letter was simple and heartbreaking. "I'm sorry, I can no longer be a part of your life." The words, though plain and straightforward, made Kyle question the hidden connotations. He was absolutely certain that his beloved Megan had strong feelings for him, just as he did for her. So what could have possibly instigated her sudden vanishing act? Reflecting on their relationship, it had only been a few months since Megan moved into his place, marking the beginning of their shared life. Before the significant step, they had been in a committed relationship for several months. Everything seemed perfect until the fateful day when she disappeared, leaving Kyle with nothing but questions. Kyle and Megan's first encounter took place at a park, a location that Kyle had no plans of visiting that day. The sequence of events leading to this unexpected meet-cute was as strange as it was fortunate. Kyle was supposed to attend a significant business meeting that day. He had called his usual taxi driver, a man he frequently relied upon for such important occasions. However, luck wasn't on his side. The driver got ensnared in the city's horrendous traffic, which Kyle loathed driving in himself, especially during the peak hours. His only alternative was to drive his dusty old Pontiac Firebird, a relic that had been sitting undisturbed in his garage for far too long. The car hadn't seen the light of day in a while, let alone a mechanic for regular maintenance. Despite its shortcomings, Kyle held a special fondness for this car. It wasn't just because of its vintage appeal, but more so because it was a cherished possession of his late father. Numerous memories were etched in Kyle's heart, featuring his father behind the wheel, driving him around to various destinations. Even though Kyle could easily afford a reliable Toyota or a luxurious Mercedes, his sentimentality kept him attached to his aged yet beloved Pontiac. However, on this critical day, when all Kyle needed was a smooth drive to the office, the car unpredictably gave out, screeching to a standstill amidst a throng of vehicles. Feeling anxious yet helpless, Kyle decided to reschedule his business meeting. He phoned his partner, suggesting to reconvene on a different day. While trying and falling to coax the old Pontiac back to life, he realized there was no rush anymore. With the afternoon sun still high, he called for roadside assistance and stepped out onto the bustling street. His car had broken down near a park, where a vibrant celebration seemed to be underway. Children and adults alike were smeared in colorful paint, their laughter echoing under the open sky. The infectious energy, accompanied by the resounding music, coaxed a smile onto Kyle's face, despite his predicament. "Are you alone? Please save me!" The piercing, urgent plea rang out, causing Kyle to jump in surprise. Before he could gather his thoughts or offer a response, a young woman had already seized his arm and was dragging him away. Kyle found himself propelled into a line with other couples, hands held high, before he could even utter a word of protest. Beaming widely, the woman hastily explained, "I'm sorry to have pulled you in like this, but as an event organizer, I can't be caught without a partner." Any protest Kyle may have wished to voice would have been drowned out by the clamor around him. Within a few minutes, he found himself thoroughly engrossed, laughter bubbling out of him as he participated in a whimsical children's game called River. For the moment, he was able to forget about everything. The fact that he was a 36-year-old man embroiled in a divorce, and the reality that this simple, joy-filled diversion wouldn't add any financial gain or tangible benefit to his life. Yet it offered him something invaluable, an unexpected moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Kyle was the type of individual who placed immense value on his time. He endeavored to ensure that each minute was spent in the pursuit of productivity, always striving to accomplish as much as possible. However, on this unusual day, he found himself astounded by how swiftly a couple of hours had breezed past, all spent in pure, undiluted enjoyment. In this moment of reflection, Kyle realized that it had been an eternity since he had last indulged in such simple, unstructured fun. It dawned on him that life held more treasures beyond the relentless race to amass wealth. There was also joy, laughter, and a spontaneity that could lead to unexpected yet delightful encounters. Alright everyone, thank you so much for joining in today's festivities. We had an absolute blast. I hope we cross paths again very soon. Stay optimistic and keep having fun. The young woman who had unexpectedly swept Kyle into this whirlwind of fun was energetically addressing the crowd through a microphone. As people began to disperse, heading towards the park's exit, she set the microphone down and sank onto a nearby speaker. Her exhalation was deep and heavy, a clear sign of her exhaustion. Observing her, Kyle decided to approach. "I haven't had this much fun in a long time," he admitted. "Cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it," she replied, her voice slightly worn out. Kyle glanced at the equipment scattered around him and asked, "Do you need any help packing up?" At this, she looked up, a weak but genuine smile gracing her lips. "Sure, I won't turn down help. I'm totally worn out. It's sweltering out here. By the way, I'm sorry for pulling you into the fray, but you really saved me. Actually, I should be thanking you. I truly enjoyed myself. Kyle responded with a sincere smile, already starting to pack the equipment away. By the way, my name's Kyle, and I'm Megan. As Kyle hoisted a heavy speaker, he found himself surprised by its weight. It was impressive to think that she handled all this equipment single-handedly. Do you always carry all this by yourself? Well, yeah, most of the time. Sometimes the people who hire me pitch in, but that's a rarity. They feel that once they've paid, they don't owe me any assistance. You're so young to be working this hard. You might burn yourself out. Megan chuckled. Kyle helped her load all the equipment into a small, whimsical green car adorned with playful illustrations. He couldn't help but smile at the sight. So, where's your next event? Tomorrow is my grandma's day, and the day after that, I'll be working at the waterfront, Megan answered, mirroring his smile. Kyle's eyebrow quirked up curiously. What's Grandma's Day? It's the day I dedicate to my grandmother. I take her to the park, to the stores, and the waterfront. Basically, I spend the day entertaining her, she explained with a fun glint in her eyes. With a final, enthusiastic wave, Megan drove away, her small, whimsically decorated car gradually disappearing from sight, leaving behind a faint bluish puff of exhaust. Kyle lingered at the spot for a while, seeming to gradually return to his usual serious self. It was as though he was allowing the magical spell of the afternoon to wear off. It took him several minutes to gather his thoughts and find the strength to amble back to his stalled car, still waiting for roadside assistance. Once back home, Kyle was met with another tempestuous outburst from his wife, Kelly. She had returned earlier than usual that day, only to find his car missing from the garage. In her experience, this typically signaled that Kyle was either fed up with work, seeking an escape from their tumultuous relationship, or both. Kelly loathed these days, for they frequently ended with Kyle stumbling back home under the influence of alcohol. His friends would drop him off, leaving her the unpleasant task of retrieving his car and driving it back home. The bitter familiarity of this routine added another layer of strain to their already strained relationship. "Kyle, where were you?" Kelly's shrill demand assaulted his ears, setting him on edge. "Why should you care?" he retorted, his irritation seeping into his tone. "I'm just asking. After all, I'm your wife. Don't I have a right to know where you've been?" She snapped back. "Oh, so now you're interested in my whereabouts?" He shot back, a bitter edge to his words. "You never informed me of your whereabouts when you were out partying till dawn." "Here we go again," Kelly sighed, feeling anxiety creeping in. "Why must you keep bringing that up?" "How can I not?" Kyle retorted, his voice cracking with anger. "You lied to me. You claimed you weren't at the club, mingling with God knows who." Suddenly, Kelly's demeanor shifted. She softened her tone, attempting a conciliatory approach. "Kyle, darling, why are we fighting? We've been together for 8 years. You know, I apologized and promised it would never happen again. Why are you escalating this argument?" "You've broken that promise more than once," Kyle countered, unimpressed by her change of tactics. "Kyle, my love," Kelly cooed, rising to her feet and sauntering over to him, exaggerating the sway of her hips. A smirk tugged at the corners of Kyle's lips. Just a year ago, he would have let it go, blinded by her physical beauty, but he had come to realize that her beauty was skin-deep and concealed a much less attractive personality. He had been oblivious to the fact that she was akin to a leech, primarily interested in him for the wealth he possessed. Her superficial charm had obscured her true intentions, but now he could see her for what she really was. Their love story had begun in the office. Kelly, a young and strikingly beautiful office manager, always seemed to know exactly what her boss required. Whether it was a cup of coffee at just the right moment or ensuring he wasn't disturbed during crucial meetings, she was always on point. Her attention to detail was meticulous. If Kyle missed anything important, she would promptly step in and manage the situation. This uncanny ability to stay on top of things didn't go unnoticed by Kyle. He was quick to appreciate her talent and finesse. What caught Kyle's attention even more was Kelly's lack of obvious attempts to seduce him. There were many young women in the office who would have jumped at the chance to date someone like Kyle, who was not only powerful and influential, but also extremely attractive. However, Kelly was different from the rest. She carried herself with an air of modesty and humility, making her stand out in a sea of overt ambition. However, either everything changed or what he'd believed to be her character had been nothing more than a facade from the start. The tipping point came last year when he received an anonymous package containing photographs of Kelly with other men at a private nightclub. The shock and betrayal he felt upon seeing those pictures was overwhelming. In retrospect, he realized he had ignored numerous warning signs and red flags about her true nature. "You realize we've spent 8 long years together, and now you're contemplating divorce?" Kelly's voice was heavy with accusation. "I haven't had a child because you were unable to father one. How can you not comprehend that? I was partying because I too was tired of it all and needed an outlet. What are you suggesting now? That I die alone?" Kyle's frown deepened. Amidst all their existing troubles, they had recently discovered that they were unable to have children, an issue that apparently lay with him. For the past 3 years, Kyle had harbored a deep desire to start a family. However, Kelly continually argued that they should focus on enjoying their youth and freedom before settling down into parenthood. This was just one of her many reasons she used to evade his talks about having children. When she finally relented, Kyle felt a surge of happiness. However, despite their best efforts, they were unable to conceive. Concerned, Kyle proposed they seek medical advice. Kelly quickly arranged for a consultation at a high-end clinic where she had several contacts. Thanks to her connections, they received immediate attention, albeit at a hefty cost. The doctor delivered the devastating news with finality. Kyle was incapable of fathering children. At that moment, Kelly put on a dramatic display of sympathy and despair, which deepened his sense of guilt and inadequacy. So overwhelmed with guilt was Kyle that he initially overlooked Kelly's repeated acts of infidelity. However, patience has its limits, and Kyle's tolerance reached its end when he began receiving photographs of his wife from various nightclubs. There she was, scantily clad and clearly inebriated, flirting openly with other men. In that instant, it dawned on Kyle that there was no future for them together. The same truth applied to Kelly as well. They were stifling each other's lives. While she yearned for a life filled with socializing and excitement, he craved a simple, peaceful, and warm family setting. Even though he was unable to father a child, they could have still chosen to adopt. But their diverging desires had led them down a path of discord, leading Kyle to realize the bitter end of their relationship was near. "Kelly," Kyle began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "After my test results came back, you claimed all you wanted was a family. Since I'm the one who can't conceive and you're perfectly capable, perhaps it's time for you to find someone else. Someone who can give you the family you say you want. Let's not make this any more painful than it already is." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "When I suggested exploring advanced medical options, you dismissed the idea of having a test-tube baby. So now you will have the chance to conceive naturally, the way you want it." His words hung heavily in the air, marking the inevitable end of their once hopeful relationship. Kyle made a move to leave, but Kelly swiftly blocked his path. "I won't agree to a divorce," she declared defiantly, "unless you promise to give me at least half of your assets." Her words resonated with a cold determination, reinforcing the final, bitter breakdown of their once intimate relationship. Kyle burst into laughter. "Are you delusional?" he retorted, incredulous. "Half of my fortune? Why? How did you contribute to amassing my wealth?" Her expression, contorted with rage, only served to elicit more laughter from him. "Go ahead, do as you please, but understand this," he said, his amusement subsiding into firm resolve. "My journey with you ends here, today." His declaration marked the irrevocable end of their tumultuous relationship. The following morning, for reasons he wouldn't fully acknowledge, Kyle found himself rushing to the park. Deep down, he was propelled by the faint hope of catching a glimpse of Megan. He had a hunch that she might frequent the park in the early hours of the day. Part of him yearned to see her vivacious energy and radiant smile again, offering a much-needed distraction from the bitter disputes with Kelly. Upon spotting Megan, Kyle felt his legs betray him, guiding him towards her as though they possessed a will of their own. His lips, almost like they were no longer under his control, formed into an unexpected but genuine smile. The sight of her seemed to ignite a spark within him, a surge of elation that he hadn't felt in a long time. Unaware of his approach, Megan was caught off guard. "Excuse me, your park games made me ill last night," Kyle spoke up from behind her. Startled by his words, Megan swiftly turned around, her eyes widening in surprise. She failed to recognize him initially due to the sunglasses he was wearing. I'm sorry, what do you mean?" she queried, her forehead creasing in confusion. Kyle gently removed his sunglasses, allowing his eyes to meet hers. "They made my heart ache for you," a light glinting in his eyes that hadn't been there for a long time. Thus began their blossoming romance. As he started spending more time with Megan, Kyle felt as if he had been living under a cloud for years. He hadn't imagined that he could still experience the flutter of excitement, the thrilling sensation of butterflies in his stomach. With Megan, he rediscovered the joy and exhilaration of new love, a feeling he thought was lost to him. His days became brighter, filled with anticipation and a sense of completeness that he hadn't felt in a long time. What endeared Kyle even more to Megan was her sense of fairness. Along with her wise grandmother, they convinced him to treat Kelly justly during their separation. Despite Kelly's hurtful actions, Megan believed in the importance of maintaining one's integrity. She persuaded Kyle that Kelly deserved to be treated fairly and to receive what she was entitled to. Her compassion and sense of justice added another layer to his growing affection and respect for her. "Sweetheart, you need to remember that she was there for you when you needed support," Megan gently reminded him one day. "People change, circumstances shift, and everyone makes mistakes. Besides, when you married her, you loved her, didn't you?" Kyle didn't have it in him to argue. He was too caught up in his newfound happiness. His mind was focused on a single goal, finalizing the divorce so he could ask Megan the most important question of his life. His heart yearned for the moment he could propose to her and hopefully embark on a joyous journey together. Life had been proceeding smoothly, only to be interrupted by a cruel twist of fate. 3 months into their burgeoning relationship, Megan's beloved grandmother passed away. This was a severe blow for her. She was deeply affected by the loss. Seeing her suffering, Kyle invited her to move in with him. He took great care of her, providing comfort and support during her grieving period. However, a month later, Megan vanished unexpectedly, leaving behind only a cryptic note. "We can't be together. I'm not what you need. I'm sorry." Kyle was left bewildered and hurt, grappling with the abrupt departure of the woman he had grown to love deeply. The note gave no clear reason, and he was left with nothing but unanswered questions and the echoing void of her absence. He questioned whether he had done something wrong or if there was someone else in Megan's life. The mere fact that she no longer wanted to be with him was something he could come to terms with, but the absence of clarity and understanding regarding the reasons behind her decision left him plagued with anxiety. The weight of uncertainty pressed upon him, compelling him to wander the city streets in search of solace and understanding. The preceding evening had been filled with a semblance of contentment and intimacy. Kyle had taken a significant step, opening up to Megan in a way he had never done before. With vulnerability in his voice, he revealed his deep-seated fear. He couldn't father children. Despite this revelation, he expressed his willingness to explore alternative paths, such as adoption or other medical options if she desired. In that moment, he had bared his soul, offering her the opportunity to decide their future together. Kyle had hoped that their shared honesty would strengthen their bond, fostering an even deeper connection between them. Amidst his disclosure about his inability to have children, Kyle had also made a solemn declaration that he would never forgive being lied to again. However, this statement was unrelated to Megan and their relationship. Those words were related to his life with Kelly. Years elapsed, and Kyle found himself seated in his office, reflecting upon the passage of time. His company had flourished and grown into a significantly larger enterprise. The walls of his office bore testament to his dedication and hard work, adorned with the words and accolades that marked the milestones of his professional journey. "Mr. Green, may I come in?" His secretary Serena peeked into his office, appearing slightly flustered. "Yes, please come in. What seems to be the matter?" Kyle inquired, curious about the cause of her agitation. Serena hesitated, adjusting her bangs nervously. "There's a rather peculiar delivery person waiting outside for you," she began. "It's not something I usually handle myself, but I thought you should see it firsthand." Kyle felt a flicker of annoyance starting to rise within him. He had a plethora of tasks demanding his attention, and he was growing wary of Serena's incessant interruptions. "What now?" he mused inwardly. "She's pushing her limits. Perhaps it's time to consider letting her go." "All right, let's go see what this is all about," Kyle responded, his tone tinged with impatience. He exited his office and surveyed the scene outside. To his surprise, he found the young boy standing there, clutching a letter in his hands. "Hey there, are you the delivery person?" Kyle inquired, studying the boy carefully. "And is that letter for me?" The young boy nodded shyly. "Yes, if you're Kyle Green, then this is for you," he confirmed. Kyle couldn't help but smile at the innocence radiating from the child. "Yes, that's me. What do you have there?" Kyle asked, his curiosity piqued. The boy extended the letter towards him. "Here, it's the letter. Just make sure you read it today. It's really important," he emphasized. After a brief pause, he added, "That's what my mom said." With a sudden surge of anticipation, Kyle pivoted on his heels and hurried back, his heart pounding in his chest. Words remained unspoken as he was overcome by the sight of the envelope in his hands. Megan's unmistakable handwriting adorned the surface, instantly recognizable to him. His emotions swirled within him, a whirlwind of hope, curiosity, and a touch of apprehension. Without hesitation, Kyle gently traced his fingers over the familiar script, feeling a rush of emotions welling up within him. "If anyone asks, I'm out of the office," Kyle declared, his voice firm and determined. Serena glanced at him, a mix of fear and concern etched across her face. She knew better than to question his directive and nodded in acknowledgement. Without wasting another moment, Kyle stormed back into his office, settling into his chair with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. With hand trembling ever so slightly, he carefully tore open the envelope, unfolding the contents within. As he began to read the words penned by Megan, a chilling realization washed over him. It became painfully clear that a single misunderstood word had shattered not only his and Megan's lives, but also the life of their son, forever altering the course of their intertwined destinies. As the puzzle pieces started to align, a significant revelation emerged. Approximately a year after Megan's sudden departure, Kyle's health began to decline rapidly, leading to his hospitalization. The private clinic he was admitted to held a familiar face, the head doctor, a close friend of his. Amidst the medical setting, Kyle's friend couldn't help but chuckle, attempting to lighten the heavy atmosphere. "Come on, my friend," the doctor laughed. "It's time for you to move on and find someone else. You can't continue living like this." The doctor's words struck a chord within Kyle, resonating with the truth he had been trying to evade. The depths of his longing for Megan and the impact of her absence had taken a toll on his well-being. As Kyle conversed with his friend, he shared the details of his past experience with Kelly, particularly her role in taking him to the doctor and the diagnosis of his infertility. His friend, well versed in the intricacies of medical matters, offered a suggestion that sparked a glimmer of hope. "Kyle, our bodies undergo changes over time," his friend advised, his voice filled with reassurance. "Why don't you consider getting tested again? Sometimes medical conditions can evolve or be reassessed." The idea resonated with Kyle, rekindling a sense of possibility. Perhaps a second round of tests could shed new light on his condition, revealing a different outcome or a revised understanding. As Kyle received the results of the retest, he was confronted with a devastating truth. It was a shocking revelation that shattered the illusion Kelly had created. The new findings confirmed that everything was indeed fine with Kyle. He was not infertile as he had been led to believe. The realization struck him with a wave of anguish and anger as he realized the depths of Kelly's deception. It became clear to Kyle that Kelly had orchestrated the entire ruse, intentionally misleading him and manipulating his emotions. She had never desired him to pursue a family, as it contradicted her own hidden agenda. Kyle remained seated in his office, his hands trembling as he retrieved the letter once more. With bated breath, he carefully reread the paragraph, absorbing the weight of Megan's heartfelt confession. "That evening, I had a surprise for you. I wanted to tell you that we were expecting a child, but when you said that you can never have children and that you would crush anyone who tried to lie to you, I got scared." The words echoed in Kyle's mind, resonating with regret and sorrow. "Maybe we should have had a conversation about this, but I couldn't bring myself to beg you to trust me. You would have never found out about our son, but I feel compelled to inform you that I'm ill. Frankly, I'm uncertain whether I'll get better or not. Please, while I'll still have the capability, consider doing a DNA test. If anything happens, please don't leave him alone." He placed the letter into his pocket. "Serena!" The secretary instantly appeared at the doorway. "Serena, how old is your son?" he asked. Serena looked bewildered and replied, He's 8? All right, you're coming with me, he said decisively. Serena was familiar with her boss and didn't question his request. She complied and followed him. They made a stop at a shopping center and entered the children's store. Serena, what do you think the age of the boy who brought the letter is? He inquired. I believe he's around 6 or 7, Serena responded. Okay, put everything in the shopping cart that might interest him, he instructed. Just toys, or should I include clothes too? Serena asked for clarification. Everything, he affirmed. They proceeded to fill the shopping cart with various items, and once they were done, Kyle closed the trunk of the car, storing the purchased items inside. You're free for the rest of the day, Kyle informed Serena, granting her a rare reprieve from her usual responsibilities. As she prepared to leave, curiosity compelled her to ask the question that had been lingering in her mind. Who is that boy? She inquired, her voice filled with genuine intrigue. Kyle's expression transformed, a radiant smile illuminating his face. The weight of his revelation lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of joy and hope. He's my son, Kyle replied, his voice infused with a mix of wonder and delight. Kyle drove his car to the small, weathered house situated on the outskirts. With a sense of purpose, he parked the vehicle and stepped out, opening the trunk to reveal bags brimming with toys, clothes, and sweets. Laden with these offerings, he made his way towards the front door, determined to bring joy to the lives that awaited him within. Balancing the bags in his hands, Kyle attempted to reach the doorbell, but the weight caused him to accidentally collide with the door, producing a loud thud. The unexpected impact caused the door to swing open, revealing a scene that filled his heart with warmth and anticipation. Kyle's eyes locked with Megan's gaze, but he was taken aback by what he saw. The person standing before him was a mere shadow of the vibrant woman he had known. Megan's once lustrous eyes were the only recognizable feature amidst the frailty that encompassed her being. The sight of her emaciated figure and pallid complexion pierced Kyle's heart. Despite the visible toll her illness had taken, Megan managed to summon a gentle smile. Sensing Kyle's overwhelming emotions, she gracefully took a step back, allowing him to enter the space that had become their reunion. Overwhelmed with love, compassion, and an acute awareness of the fleetingness of time, Kyle moved forward, embracing Megan with tenderness. Tears streamed down his face as he held her, a mingling of joy and sorrow intertwining in his heart. You came. Kyle held Megan tightly, his voice choked with emotion. Of course I came, he whispered, his words filled with profound sense of commitment and devotion. In that moment, surrounded by the weight of their shared history and the fragility of the present, Kyle's presence became an affirmation of his unwavering love for Megan. He gently pulled back from the embrace, their eyes locked in an unspoken understanding. Megan's voice, weakened but filled with gratitude, trembled as she responded. I knew you would come. Kyle stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the surroundings until they landed on a young boy who seemed taken aback by his presence. The boy rose from his seat, a mixture of surprise and curiosity evident in his expression. Kyle extended a warm smile, his heart swelling with affection for the child standing before him. Hello, Kyle greeted, his voice filled with warmth. Kyle carefully placed the boxes he had carried in front of him, his smile growing wider with each passing moment. In his excitement and nervousness, he found himself struggling to find the right words to express his emotions. The simple phrase that escaped his lips came out somewhat awkwardly, but it was filled with genuine love and joy. These are for you. He watched the boy's face light up with anticipation, a mix of curiosity and delight sparkling in his eyes. As the boy eagerly opened the boxes, his youthful enthusiasm radiated throughout the room, filling Kyle's heart with an indescribable warmth. It was a small gesture, but it represented so much more, a symbol of the love and connection they were building, a testament to the new beginning they were embarking upon. At that moment, a muffled sound caught their attention, drawing their focus towards Megan, who had collapsed onto the floor. Kyle's heart raced with panic as he rushed to her side, cradling her in his arms. Fear gripped him, but he knew he had to act swiftly. With trembling hands, he dialed the number of his friend at the private clinic, desperately seeking guidance and assistance. As Kyle relayed the distressing situation to his friend, a mixture of frustration and disbelief filled his voice. It feels like they treated her the other way around, the doctor lamented, his words tinged with anger and sorrow. In an attempt to offer reassurance, he continued, "But don't worry, with proper treatment, she'll be as good as new in a month." Kyle walked into the hospital ward, a sense of determination etched on his face. As he approached Megan's bedside, his smile radiated warmth and reassurance. Two pairs of eyes, one wary but hopeful, and the other young and curious, met his gaze. "The doctor said he'll make you the old Megan in a month," Kyle remarked, his voice filled with optimism. Megan mustered a weak smile in response, but her melancholy quickly overshadowed it. She expressed doubt, believing that she could never fully regain who she once was. "You go ahead and get some rest. John and I will spend quality time together, and we'll visit you every day." Megan's doubts were met with Kyle's unwavering support. He emphasized that he was there for both her and John, their family united in the face of adversity. Expressing his disbelief at the turn their lives had taken, Kyle reassured Megan that blame lay with neither of them. Apologies and reflections could wait for another time. Kyle's hand extended towards John, offering comfort and stability. The young boy hesitated briefly before placing his trust in Kyle's hand, symbolizing the newfound connection and strength they would draw from one another. As they stepped out onto the street, a sense of newfound hope and possibility filled the air. Kyle opened the car door, allowing John to settle in. With a reassuring smile, he suggested their first stop. "So, first we'll go to a cafe and eat?" The boy nodded in agreement, his gaze fixed intently on Kyle. There was a mixture of curiosity and longing in his eyes as he posed a heartfelt question. "Will you love my mom?" Kyle's response was immediate, his voice filled with unwavering sincerity. "Of course I will. I've always loved her." The boy's gaze then turned towards himself, seeking reassurance and affirmation. Kyle's eyes met John's, brimming with love and paternal warmth. "And me?" John asked, his voice laced with vulnerability. A gentle smile graced Kyle's lips as he responded, his voice overflowing with love and conviction. "How could I not love if you're my son?" The words carried the weight of a lifelong commitment, a promise to nurture and cherish the bond that had finally been discovered. A few weeks later, Megan was out. The family decided to go to the very park where they first met. As they strolled through the park, enjoying the simple pleasures of ice cream and the warmth of family togetherness, their paths crossed with a woman diligently collecting empty beer cans. Her gaze lifted in astonishment as she recognized Kyle, her eyes widening with a mix of emotions. Then, her gaze shifted to the young boy beside him, whose resemblance to Kyle was unmistakable. Tears welled up in Kelly's eyes as she realized the opportunities she had missed and the choices that had led her down a destructive path. In that moment, she understood the depths of her regret, realizing that she could have been the one walking beside Kyle, sharing in the love and happiness he had found. Summoning the strength to stand, Kelly uttered Kyle's name in a whisper, her voice laced with a mixture of pain and longing. Kyle turned around, his eyes clouded with confusion as he tried to place the familiar voice. It took a moment for recognition to dawn upon him, and his initial anger dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of sorrow as he beheld the person Kelly had become. "It's me, Kelly," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Kyle's heart ached as he observed the toll that years of drinking and drug abuse had taken on her, eroding the beauty that once defined her. Emotions swirled within Kyle, a turbulent blend of anger, sadness, and compassion. While memories of their tumultuous past resurfaced, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the person standing before him, a shadow of the woman he had known. It turned out that she couldn't handle everything she received from the divorce, so she decided to sell it. Unfortunately, the money didn't last long because she started living a luxurious lifestyle. Eventually, she ended up in a difficult financial situation. With a sense of nostalgia, she asked, "Could you possibly spare some change for old time's sake?" Kyle stood his ground, refusing to give her even a single penny. It was Megan, once again, who had convinced him to let go of the past and move on. However, her next request caught him completely off guard. She took him aside and said something that shook him to the core. "I understand your feelings of hatred towards her, but I also believe that deep down, you possess the capacity for great kindness," she whispered to him. After some deliberation, Megan managed to persuade Kyle to consider hiring Kelly for a position within his company. Kyle was taken aback by this unexpected request. It wasn't an easy decision for him, but he eventually found the strength to overcome his reservations. Taking a deep breath, Kyle made up his mind and offered Kelly a job as a packer in the warehouse. It was a position that required attention to detail and efficiency. Kelly, despite her challenging circumstances, approached her new job with humility and a strong work ethic. She dedicated herself to her responsibilities and worked tirelessly. Her efforts did not go unnoticed, as she played a significant role in implementing various improvements within the warehouse operations. Impressed by her dedication and exceptional performance, the manager recognized Kelly's contributions and recommended her for the prestigious title of Warehouse Employee of the Year. It was a testament to her hard work and the positive impact she had made on the company. Kyle arrived back at his house on that specific day and warmly held his wife, Megan, in a heartfelt embrace. As he gazed into her eyes, a wordless smile appeared on his face, and he spoke two uncomplicated but profound words: "I am grateful." Kyle acknowledged and valued Megan's influence in persuading him to exhibit kindness and persevere, resulting in positive outcomes for everyone involved.